Welcome back, explorers, to the Dirt Diaries. Another episode this week. We are tackling the site of Mycenae. Have you heard of it? It's a mythical city that turns out is very much real, just like Troy. Yes, Troy is real. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss anything archaeology or ancient history related. If you're listening to this as a podcast, rate, subscribe, and comment for more. And if none of the above fits you and you're new here, hi, welcome to the Dirt Diaries. I'm Dr. Tenninger Kallenberger, and I bring the ancient history to you because no, this is not ancient aliens. This is the real thing. And of course, these are the Dirt Diaries. And of course, a special shout out and hello to everybody over on Patreon, whether you are lounging in the villa, whether you are taking notes in the library, or snooping in the restricted section. All right, so last episode, you all really got a lot closer to me and saw me cry off some of my lashes because we ranked some of the most gut-wrenching, heartstring-pulling ancient poems about love. And, I was thinking, how are we going to top this? Or, what do we talk about next? Because it's kind of hard to beat an episode like that, especially like around Valentine's Day, especially because February is really, really a month about love. But I thought, hey, we got to switch gears and talk about a really cool mythical real site, that of Mycenae, which I actually did a poll for you guys to figure out whether you guys wanted me to talk about Troy or Mycenae, and till the bitter end, it was 50-50 until all of a sudden Mycenae just took off and you guys just wanted Mycenae. And because Schliemann dug both, we are in for a treat. Now, I am extremely lucky because I've not only worked in Greece, but I've actually got to visit the site of Mycenae a few years ago, and it was utterly breathtaking from start to finish. And I hope one day our group travel with Dirt Diaries can take us to Greece. I would love to show you guys ancient Greek history, Bronze Age Greek history, and more, and show you guys where I've actually worked because, I don't know, that would be like a full circle moment for me. And Mycenae is one of my favorite sites ever. Like, I know I always say that about like ancient history and archaeological sites, but Mycenae is special to me because I had to know the site like the back of my hand, especially with the two grave circles that I'm going to be mentioning today. I had to know basically the ins and outs of the graves, who was buried there, what was found there, and what the trade connections were for my doctoral exams when I took those a few years ago. And yes, if you recall, there are two grave circles at the site of Mycenae. We have grave circle A and, shockingly, grave circle B. I know, surprise, surprise. But what is a surprise is grave circle B is actually older than grave circle A. But grave circle A was dug first, and thus A got before B. And of course, both grave circles have been fully excavated. So grave circle A was excavated by Schliemann along with Stamatakis. And then later on for grave circle B, Milo Nas actually dug grave circle B. And a special thank you and shout out to Morphe for sending me their whole pack of the reimagined makeup brushes. I did the whole look today using them, and it was a real treat. The brushes were so smooth and so incredible to use. So a special thank you and shout out to Morphe. Thank you guys. But because we got to dive into grave circle A, Mycenae, golden masks, and more, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in. And we got to set the scene for this really important ancient site because it actually might ring a bell for some of you with its name because it does appear in mythology. And of course, this is actually taking place, this site is actually on the mainland of Greece, meaning it is on the main area of Greece. It's on like continental Greece. It is not part of the Greek islands. So not Crete, not Santorini, not Mykonos, nothing like that. The Greek islands back in the Bronze Age are actually referred to as the Cycladic Islands. And Crete, the largest of the Greek islands, is home to the Minoans during the Bronze Age. And of course, during the Bronze Age, from the mainland, we have the Mycenaeans and their civilization. So we are on the mainland of Greece for this. And if you're wondering, just kind of placing it geographically, it is southwest of Athens. It's about 100 miles, give or take, a few miles from Athens. And of course, as I said earlier, if you are a Greek myth girly like myself, you will, of course, recognize the site of Mycenae from Homer's Iliad. It is one of the major kingdoms and really a major place in a sense because we have Agamemnon who is ruling there. His brother Menelaus is actually the king of Sparta, and they are both sons of Atreus. And Agamemnon, yes, this, of course, he is a famed Trojan hero and everything, but we do actually have a golden mask from the site of Mycenae that is now termed the Golden Mask of Agamemnon. And of course, keep that in mind because we will touch a little bit on this, but the mask also kind of deserves its own episode. So let me know what you think about that as well. And first, because we're talking about the site of Mycenae, we gotta talk about who's really digging at it. And that brings us to our buddy Schliemann. So, of course, Schliemann on his own really should have also his own episode and everything, but let's kind of set the stage of what is going on with our buddy Heinrich Schliemann at this point in the 1870s, if you will. So let's travel back then. So already in the 1870s, the early portion, well, he's already dug at Troy in Turkey, which is a neighbor to Greece. So he was already digging at Troy, and well, he actually kind of ran into some issues legally. And this is because when he discovered the treasure of Priam, he wanted to keep it all together. He didn't want to separate this treasure. And well, the Turkish government really didn't like that because prior to excavating Troy and other areas, he had made an agreement with the Turkish government that basically said, hey, whatever you find, we get our own half of the pot, if you will. And it's kind of similar to what we saw with the episode on Puabi with Sir Leonard Woolley dividing the finds from the Royal Cemetery at Ur between the British Museum, the Penn Museum, and the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. It's kind of the same thing of like who gets the rights and who gets the treasure during this time. So before everything, Schliemann had been like, yes, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I'm going to give you your half. He does not give them their half. So the Turkish government is suing Schliemann. And not only is this like bad legally, but this is really putting a damper on his work because it's actually making it so that he can't dig anymore there. He cannot get basically his like dig license renewed. So he's like, okay, I don't really need to be here anymore. I don't need to dig anymore here. Let's go to Greece. Because if we found Troy, that means, we should be able to find where some of the famed heroes who fought at Troy on the Greek side, where they're buried, right? Makes sense. And it wasn't just any grave that he wanted to find. He wanted to find the grave of Agamemnon, which like a great goal to have. I know having goals is super important to people. For me, it was finishing my dissertation. And for Schliemann, it was finding the grave of Agamemnon. Really shoot for the stars, you guys. So he didn't want to just find Agamemnon. Like that was a huge driving component for him. But he wanted to find also the graves or tombs of also his contemporaries because these were the famed Greek heroes who fought on the front lines at Troy. And being a man who was, of course, very well-read for the time, he surmised that these graves had to be in the city, in the site of Mycenae, in its enclosed walls, because Mycenae really has these massive cyclopean walls, which, from hearing the word cyclopean, it's kind of based, the name is actually kind of based on the folklore and myth and legend that these massive walls and architectural features could only have been built by the massive races of the Cyclops. And why is this? It is actually because these walls and architecture are made out of massive limestone boulders, so super heavy, and they are fitted together without any mortar. So there's nothing between these stones, actually, that's like holding them. It is the weight, it is how they are hewn and cut that they almost like interlock perfectly with one another. So these walls, these cyclopean walls, they are very, very thick. The ones at Mycenae are meters thick. And I'm pretty sure on average, I'm blanking on the minimum and maximum, but I do know like the average thickness of the wall is around 5 meters, 5 meters thick. This wall is. Yep. And the Cyclopean wall at Mycenae encloses really Grave Circle A, the Citadel, and more. It's really cool to see. The Cyclopean wall also holds or houses, I guess holds is the correct word. That's where the Lion's Gate is today. And of course, this wall is really important because it serves as a great fortification wall. In fact, a lot of times when we see Cyclopean masonry in architecture, it is for fortification walls. And how this wall is set up with the ramp leading up to Mycenae makes sense when you are trying to figure out how to best set up defensive components for this site. It makes the most sense. So, once we get inside the wall, inside the main wall, this is where Schliemann in 1874 starts to do some test pits. So why would you want to do test pits? Because you actually want to do, just maybe like a 1 meter by 1 meter test pit, 2 meter by 2 meter. You want to see if the area that you are suspecting might have something is actually worth the time, energy, effort, expenses before you fully go into like full excavation mode. So that's what he was trying to do here, right within the walls. He wanted to kind of poke around, prod around, and figure out, hey, is this area actually going to really show up anything, or should we go elsewhere at Mycenae? So of course he found the remains of some parts of a wall. He also found painted figurines of women and cows. Love that. And he also found an unsculpted slab of stone. And, he really was like, this might be a gravestone. So keep that in the back of your noggin. So because of this unmarked, unsculpted flat stone, Schliemann was really like, okay, you know what? Let's dig here. So within, I believe, a few months, he had found basically the entire perimeter of what we refer to and know as today as Grave Circle A. And this perimeter that he found is actually made up of a double ring of vertical slabs that are standing upright. And these vertical slabs are about 4 feet tall, and the entire diameter of Grave Circle A is about 87 meters wide. And then if you look at the image on the screen, in between the space that would have been between the vertical slabs, there would have been a flat stone placed on top of them so that the entire top of this perimeter would have had flat stones lining it. And when this was uncovered fully, Schliemann was like, oh, this. You guys want to know what this is? This, you guys, is the Agora. This is the meeting place. Because from Homer, he used to write that this was the assembly place where elders of the community would come together to debate. And from Homer, they would come and debate on, quote, smoothed stones, end quote. So, beep boop bop, Schliemann's putting this together and he's like, this is the area that Homer's talking about. And within this 87 meter diameter circle that he uncovered, this is where he would actually uncover more flat stones that he actually took to be gravestones. And he's pretty right on that. They're now referred to today as grave stelas from Mycenae, and many of them are decorated with reliefs. And these gravestones, these grave stelas, are actually pretty unique. They've really only been uncovered not only just on the Greek mainland, but they've really only been uncovered from the site of Mycenae, but they operate in a very similar manner to, how gravestones act for us today. They designate where a grave is. And these stones visually, rather than, words today that has date of when they were born, date where they died, a few sentences or phrases about that individual, There's actually not going to be that on these grave stelas. What are on these grave stelas that are some of my favorite? We have images of martial iconography, so images that are particularly associated with war and warfare. One of my favorites, which you can see here, is a charioteer. So he's riding. It almost looks like he has a lance in his one arm. And then other iconography that we see that we know of as, being used in the Aegean world during this time are double spirals, running spirals. We also have other hunting scenes with lions because, yes, there used to be lions on the Greek mainland back in the day. And of course, these stones marked where the shaft graves were, where they were cut into the rock meters below them. So it kind of marked, where these graves were. So in Grave Circle A, there are 6 graves. Schliemann excavated 5 out of the 6. The 6th one was actually dug by Stamatakis, who was the representative from the Greek authorities there. And he was basically overseeing everything that Schliemann was doing during the excavations. And it is actually through Stamatakis' notes that we actually are able to reconstruct basically everything in these graves, that we are able to see, where the exact locations of the individuals were, where were they found, where were the grave goods, how many people were in there, and everything. So Stamatakis, while, Schliemann is often really associated with digging Mycenae and Grave Circle A, Stamatakis, he should be up there as well. All right, so we have 6 graves, 6 shaft graves. What was in them? Well, you bet your bottom dollar we know what was in them, because these graves were so rich that they are known as royal graves. And back when they were uncovered, because of the sheer wealth and gold and abundance and opulence in these graves, nobody argued against them being referred to as royal tombs, royal graves, anything like that. And because of all the gold, all the burial goods, all the armor, all the weaponry that, we're going to go into, Schliemann, he was like, this is it. This is where the warriors who fought at Troy, this is where they are buried. Which, all right, I'll give points for, thinking that, because I'm pretty sure my brain would also think that as well. So from all of the graves, all 6 graves, we have 19 individuals buried within them. So that means, if you're doing the math, not everybody has a grave to themselves. In fact, we actually see multiple inhumations, so multiple people buried in the same grave. And I would love to do a whole nother episode on the breakdown of all of these graves, but we got to keep going on with the whole site of Mycenae, because I believe there's actually been some genetic analysis done on these individuals. And there's also been, if not genetic analysis, skeletal analysis on these individuals. But moving on. So with these 19 individuals, we also get 3 women who are part of the 19, and we also have 2 infants as well. The rest are adult males. And all of these individuals, the floors of their grave where they were buried were all lined in small pebbles. And rather than being buried in an extended position where they're lying flat on their back with their legs out and everything, many of these burials are actually in the contracted position. So think on the side and kind of curled up. That's the contracted position. And on some of these bodies, we get some of the famous gold and electrum masks. And these were often placed on the bodies of male skeletons. But on the infants, we actually get almost gold plated. They're gold foil, but it almost looks like it's gold armor that is placed on top of the skeletal remains of the infants. It's really, really interesting, as you can see from the image. And it's so delicate, it's beautiful, and just the care and attention that went into this is, we don't see anything like it today. And okay, so many of the men had golden or electrum masks. What about the women? Well, the women also had a ton of stuff on them. Women, they were actually found to have diadems on them. So today, when I say the word diadem, many of us will probably have an immediate image come into mind about it, because a diadem really today is going to mean like a small crown. Many of us might think, it could be on par with a tiara, but diadems in the ancient world, diadems in the Bronze Age and the Aegean world, I should say specifically with this kind, well, they're going to look like gold foil bands that are just kind of placed right where you would have like the middle of your forehead. That's where they would rest. And some of these diadems could be super simple with just gold foil, very delicate, very beautiful. Some of them could have designs on them. Some of them could have like a little bump on the top. But for the most part, we're just going to kind of see straight gold. Still very beautiful. And along with the golden diadems, because of the clothes that they were buried in, archaeologists also uncovered golden discs. And on these golden discs that likely adorned their robes, their attire, everything, we're seeing really beautiful natural scenes. So scenes that include different kinds of fish, including a cuttlefish. We have butterflies. We also have more like geometric aspects of spirals and rosettes as well, just like the one that we saw from the necklace of Puabi. But wait, that's not all. No. How could that be everything? Well, it's not, because everything that came out of these 6 shaft graves of Grave Circle A literally fills a whole wing of the National Museum of Archaeology in Athens. Like, there is so much stuff out of here. So what else is there, you might be wondering? Well, we have bracelets. We have large pins, likely for garments that ended in crystal knobs. Oh, another episode topic I would love to do, which we will in the future, which is swords. There is a very, very early sword. I believe it's from Malia. And it's one of the first swords on Crete that was developed. And it has a crystal knob on the bottom of its handle. Oh, so gorgeous. I can't wait to talk about that. But okay, so we have a ton of stuff coming out, including the golden pins with the crystal knobs on them. We also have tons of pottery, tons of faience. We have so many different types of vessels, including those made of alabaster, which means it's coming from Egypt. We also have amber beads. We have amethyst. We have carnelian. What else do we have? We have silver, we have gold vessels. There's so many incredible things. And of course, swords and daggers, along with gold, both gold signet rings and gold cushion seals. And one of the golden vessels that was uncovered is actually really, really interesting, because on its handles, there are doves. All right, kind of sounds cool because there's dove handles, but for a lot of us, that will probably really mean nothing. I mean, it meant nothing to me personally when I came across this, until I continued on with research, and it had said that, of course, our buddy Schliemann knew the Iliad inside and out, because in the Iliad, there is actually a description of either a golden cup or a bowl that the aged hero Nestor actually had with him at Troy, according to Homer. Because, who doesn't have the Iliad memorized back in 1874? I mean, I certainly don't, but our buddy Schliemann did. And a complete sidebar with that, but one of my advisors in grad school, when I was stressed about like getting things published or done on time, he would simply ask me what I was doing at 3:00 in the morning, because if I wasn't sleeping, that's the perfect time to be pumping out publications, articles, my dissertation, my master's thesis, or learning ancient Greek. What are you doing at 3 a.m. if not doing that? So what was Schliemann doing at 3 a.m.? Probably memorizing the Iliad. Okay, but back to the shaft graves, because there are swords and daggers, and as a sword girl, we got to talk about them because they're some of my favorite. I have looked at them intricately. I have drawn their handles. That's something I've memorized is Caro's descriptions of these swords. And for swords, we will have a whole episode in the future on different weapons of the Bronze Age. But for Mycenae, the swords that are found in the graves of Grave Circle A are of type A and type B. Type A is earlier and was really developed on Crete. They are a lot longer in terms of their blade length, which is good. The downside to type A swords is when you get too long of blades, you might run into issues of percussive force, meaning if these are swords and they're at a certain length, at some point when you clash blades with another swords person, you might have percussive force issues, meaning there could be a weakness at that portion of the blade because it is so long, because it is so thin, and there's not enough strength at that portion, meaning when it's hit, it could actually cause the blade to break. So type A, there is a defined midrib, but it's not very strong. The tang, in some type A's, there are small tangs there, but type B comes around, and type B is actually a lot shorter than type A, so it has less issues of percussive force. It's also, you're able to do more swinging methods with it. With type A, if you are slashing, it's going to, sorry to nerd out, but it's going to actually just cause more like surface wounds rather than actually disarming or disabling your opponent. So with type B, you get shorter blades, you get more force behind those blades because the midrib is more developed during this time. And also the tang is extended underneath the haft and the handle. So there is more balance in the blade. So the user can also wield it better. But 'tis a tale for another time to nerd out about ancient weaponry and swords. But that's what y'all have to look forward to, is me absolutely geeking out about ancient weapons. And, you know, because of the swords that we are finding in the grave, what's really interesting about these swords is that these swords are actually seen in the images that are on the cushion seals, that are on the signet rings and the other seals. In fact, a lot of the weaponry from these smiting scenes actually appears to represent the elite swords and the other burial goods that were found in those specific tombs, which is super cool. We're seeing art reflect reality with the actual swords that are being found next to them. And of course, the imagery on all of these burial goods, outside of, you know, being associated with the natural world, is going to be heavily focused on martial iconography and that of warfare and other combat tactics. And in my own opinion, these are actually of note because of the, you know, current work that I am doing and publishing on, which is that these images may actually be representative of an emerging elite warrior class. And even perhaps that these, you know, images may be a visual narrative of, you know, a story or a myth that was based on an earlier oral tradition. And that over time, this oral tradition, this story that was, you know, maybe passed down from generation to generation, has in itself, the story, the artwork, the imagery has become mythicized on its own. And when you see these images that have martial iconography of these heroes really just battling, sometimes 1 against 2, sometimes 1 against 3, and in one instance with the Battle of Glen, what we see, if I was digging with Schliemann, I too probably would have thought, oh my gosh, these scenes look exactly like what Homer is describing. The catch is, Homer is writing pre-7th century. It's around 8th century, 7th century BCE. Mycenae, with Grave Circle A, dates to the late Helladic 1 and 2 period, meaning, in time-wise, that is almost 800 years prior. So it's about 16 to 1500, depending on the chronology that you're looking at. It could be anywhere between 1650 and 1400. All right, so there is another grave circle at the site of Mycenae. It is outside the city wall, and it is known today as Grave Circle B. Fun fact about Grave Circle B is it's actually older than that of Grave Circle A. So that means it dates earlier than 1600. It dates earlier than the shaft graves and all of the gold. It's earlier, and it's actually like down the hill from Grave Circle A. And what's absolutely crazy about Grave Circle A and B is that the poorest grave of grave circle A is still richer than the richest grave of grave circle B. Like the wealth separation between the two is astronomical between these two grave circles. And because of that, the objects that are found in grave circle A represent a new type of wealth that had never before been seen on the Greek mainland. And of course, while many of the objects are made from gold, some of the other objects, including that of like amber, faience, and more, well, that is really indicative of foreign influence and foreign exchange. Some of the artifacts from grave circle A were likely produced by Minoan artisans from the island of Crete. But if it wasn't made from artisans on Crete, it likely came from further away. So what would have come from further away? Well, some of the stuff, including ivory, likely had to be imported. Amber also was not local to the Greek mainland. Amber actually had to come from the Baltic region, so all the way up north. And yes, we do have trade connections all the way between the mainland of Greece and the Baltic region going on during the Bronze Age. Very, very cool. And of course, when you get lapis lazuli, carnelian, and amethyst, those are also not local. There's also, from grave circle A really beautiful stag rhyton, and it's believed that that came from ancient Anatolia, so modern day Turkey. And it's actually very similar to other anthropomorphic drinking vessels of the time from Turkey. And these anthropomorphic drinking vessels and trade with Anatolia and Greece goes as far back as the 3rd millennium BCE. And of course, because many of the objects in grave circle A are made from gold, we have a gold problem, don't we? We always do. Gold is always the problem. But as always, scholars are questioning the origin of where the gold came from. So it is believed that because this roughly corresponds with the New Kingdom in Egypt, that the gold made its way to Mycenae from Egypt. Gold in ancient Egypt during the New Kingdom, some authors back in the ancient times have said that gold was as abundant as sand in ancient Egypt. So it makes sense to think that, gold was coming from Egypt. So another possibility of, where gold is coming from, if not from Egypt, is from the north, the Transylvanian connection. And it really wouldn't be shocking if objects from the north were making its way down to the mainland of Greece. And if Baltic amber beads were making its way to the mainland of Greece and finding their way into these shaft graves, gold could have taken the same route. And of course, as always, scientific analysis is not always helpful when trying to narrow down the origin of gold, as we all know. And when we look at the gold from grave circle A, we get both platinum-bearing gold and non-platinum-bearing gold. Now, this may actually represent different sources for the gold. Okay, so now we have even more of a word problem. So further testing has been done on gold from the Aegean world, including that of the shaft graves. So what testing? Well, X-ray fluorescence analysis on gold from the shaft graves found that the gold objects in these graves had a very similar copper and silver composition that seemed very similar to gold found at Varna. And you might be wondering, where is Varna? Varna is actually on the coast of the Black Sea. So again, not exactly next door neighbors to Greece, but still could have been possible that gold could have been from there. And Varna actually has an extremely long history at smelting gold and just a very long held history at producing golden objects and everything, dating as far back as I believe the 5th millennium BCE, I'm pretty sure that they are the oldest. I'm trying to rack my brain. And remember how grave circle A was found within the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae? Yeah, that wasn't always the case. Why? Because the Lion Gate was actually constructed around the late Helladic III period, which roughly corresponds to 1300 through 1250 BCE. And why were they, one, building this wall and then bringing in Grave Circle A, you might be wondering? It is likely to fend off oncoming attacks from outsiders, because during this time is when kind of the end of the Bronze Age is coming. It seems like a lot of these civilizations, a lot of these ancient sites, communities are in decline. So when that happens, there could be, conflict over resources, and you might need to make a fortification wall. And the late Helladic III period, so 1300 to, 1250-ish BCE, this is centuries after not only Grave Circle B, but also after Grave Circle A. So it is really interesting that the Mycenaeans during this time period are creating the wall to also include Grave Circle A. It also may suggest that these later peoples wanted to kind of bring the memory of their ancestral kings into their citadel, into their walls. Perhaps their ancestral kings who were warriors and great leaders, perhaps they would save them during this time. So, is this where the famed Agamemnon was buried? Grave Circle A? No. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but no. 'Twas not the area. I'm so sorry to say. But the gold mask of Agamemnon, well, that was actually found in grave 5 of Grave Circle A. So, our buddy Schlieman's probably working overtime thinking that he has discovered the grave of Agamemnon. Maybe a tomb, maybe something that belongs to him. But the golden mask of Agamemnon, as we know it today, well, as you can see from the image on screen, doesn't really look like Agamemnon if, I were to be asked point blank. In fact, many individuals don't think that this is Agamemnon or even dates to the late Helladic 1 and 2 period, that this might not even be a Bronze Age artifact. No. Some actually suspect that the curled ears and the mustache may belong to somebody a little bit closer in time to us. But what do you guys think? And of course, there is a whole lot more controversy surrounding the mask, but that is another story for another time. And what's even crazier, we actually do have some writings from Schliemann when he came across this mask. Of course, as soon as he made the discovery, much like our buddy Woolley did, well, he sent out a telegram. I'm going to line my eyes and I'm going to come back to tell you all about the telegram. So Schliemann finds what he calls the Mask of Agamemnon, and he sends a telegram out to the king of Greece at the time and says, quote, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." Chills. Oh, so cool. Like if this were actually like Agamemnon, so cool. So was there a tomb of Agamemnon? If he wasn't found in Grave Circle A, was there actually a tomb of Agamemnon? There is a tomb, quote unquote, of Agamemnon, but was it actually the tomb of Agamemnon? Probably not. Again, don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but we got to talk about it because there kind of was. Well, at least there was a tomb, I should say. So this tomb on your way up to the citadel of Mycenae is actually called the tomb of Agamemnon. It's also referred to as the treasury of Atreus as well. I've heard it called both. I've seen it called both. So really, whatever floats your boat with what you want to call it. And the treasure of Atreus, the tomb of Agamemnon, whichever you want to call it, it is actually a tomb. It's a Tholos tomb. Another name for a Tholos tomb that maybe you've heard on TV or referred to in books is also called a beehive tomb because it kind of looks like a beehive from the inside. And these types of tombs have a very long history in the Aegean during the Bronze Age. It's just a different type of tomb. And, from archaeological excavations of this Tholos tomb, we actually get some chronology. And archaeological reports now place the construction of this Tholos tomb to around the same time as the construction of the Cyclopean wall that encapsulated Grave Circle A and the construction of the Lion's Gate at Mycenae. So again, we're looking at the very end of the late Bronze Age on the mainland of Greece. We are looking between that 1300 and 1200 BCE time period. Meaning, again, to put this into larger chronology, this tomb is centuries younger than Grave Circle A and Grave Circle B. So the construction of Grave Circle A and the people who were buried there had already been buried there for centuries by the time that it was brought into the walls and by the time that this Tholos tomb was constructed. And finally, after the construction of this Tholos tomb and the building of the walls, Mycenae, as an ancient site, actually begins to swiftly decline, unfortunately, much like many other ancient sites during this time period. They're all just going into steep decline during the end of the Bronze Age, right before the Bronze Age collapsed. And it would continue to decline until the site's later abandonment around 1100 BCE. So between the construction of the wall tomb of Agamemnon and its decline, we get like 150, 200 years max. And this time, so that 1100 BCE date really corresponds with the entire collapse of the Bronze Age in the Eastern Mediterranean world. Now, dates will vary wherever you are in the Eastern Mediterranean. I know Dr. Eric Klein, he actually pinpoints it to, 1177, but basically from 1200 to 1100 BCE, that whole century just sounds like absolute upheaval in hell because there are so many different factors going into this collapse. And I would love not only to have Dr. Klein on to discuss this, but to discuss the Bronze Age collapse, because I think so many people, I get asked this question like second to how the pyramids were built. It's not like a one-worded answer or like a one answer to this problem. There's so many different answers of there were so many different things going on during this time that led to this collapse. It didn't just happen overnight. No, it was literally just everything happening all at once. And unfortunately, the civilizations, they just couldn't handle it at the time. So, of course, like everything for the late Bronze Age, we don't know what the one straw that broke Mycenae's back was to send it into literal upheaval and eventual abandonment, but there are multiple theories about what may have occurred. One of the leading theories for Mycenae specifically is that this was the result of what happened after the site had undergone years of upheaval and social strife. Basically, they had been facing internal conflict for too long until basically it broke. The system broke. So that's one theory. Mycenae also, another theory is that they may have suffered from basically foreign invaders. And many of you may know who I'm talking about, which are the Sea Peoples. So the Sea Peoples were also moving not only through Greece, but they were also moving to Egypt and the Levant and Mesopotamia. In fact, I believe it's, oh my gosh, is it Merneptah, the son of Ramses II, or is it Ramses III, who names the Sea People? I want to say it's Merneptah. Like, Jeopardy question, final answer. I'm pretty sure it's Merneptah, saying like the enemies are coming from the sea. I also think Ramses II may have also dealt with them as well, along with his son Merneptah, and then Merneptah's successor, which I believe is Ramses III. Oh, my Egyptian king list is getting boggled. Alternatively, another theory is that Mycenae was hit with a lot of environmental issues. So this could have been earthquakes, volcanic activity. Yes, there is actually a volcano in the Aegean Sea. It is actually the entire island of modern Santorini is a volcanic crater. So the ancient name of Santorini is Thera, and there was actually a volcanic eruption back in the Bronze Age. It's kind of the Bronze Age Pompeii. So there are a lot of natural disasters that are going on during this time. And there have been environmental studies as well done on the region to see, was there just famine? Was there drought? What other environmental factors were going on here? And more often than not, a lot of things were going bad during the collapse of the Bronze Age. Like, it wasn't just one thing, like a ton of earthquakes, a ton of volcanoes, a ton of drought, a ton of X, a ton of Y, a ton of raiders. It was everything all at once. And it just caused everything to just collapse. I mean, how could it not? But whatever the case, whether it was a conglomeration of, internal strife, foreign invaders, or natural disasters, it doesn't change the course of the story, unfortunately, and the eventual abandonment of the site. Because the site was actually deserted around the 11th century BCE, and it would actually not be inhabited again until classical Greece. Because after the collapse of the Bronze Age, as I said earlier, Greece would actually enter in what historians term the Greek Dark Ages. And thus that is the tale of Mycenae. There are so many other stories that have come out of Mycenae of, what caused the collapse, all the incredible grave goods coming out of not only Grave Circle A, but Grave Circle B as well, and the foreign influence that we do see in them. And, I would love to dive into some of the controversies or craziest finds, because there is the controversy surrounding the golden mask of Agamemnon. There's also record and painted art, because they didn't have photos, of a mummy that was dug by Schliemann in Grave Circle A. So yes, we have a mummy in mainland Greece. Yes, mummies in Greece. I would do a whole episode on mummies in Greece because we got one from Mycenae. So I would love to do more episodes, about the site of Mycenae, but I wanted to get this one done to talk kind of about like the bigger aspects going on. Why was Schliemann digging here? What did he find? And all of the crazy cool things that come along with the site of Mycenae. So what do you guys think? Did you like Mycenae? Have you been to Mycenae? I cried when I saw the Lion Gate. It was very, very interesting. And there's actually a few reports out now that do talk about the fact that the Lion's Gate may actually not represent lions, but another mythical figure. So maybe we'll dive into them as well. But as always, if you are looking for more archaeology, ancient history content with all of your ancient history loving friends, come be tombmates over on Patreon with us. And if you want to travel through history, time, food, and culture with an archaeologist and an art historian, well, we're headed to China this year, so you can come with all of your best history loving friends as we travel to China to go see the tomb of the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, his terracotta army. We will go on our own journey to find immortality and the elixir to life. We will also be going on the Great Wall of China, going through the Forbidden City, and so much more. I'm super, super excited about that. So come travel with all of your best friends. And a little surprise for everybody. I have seen the new horror game Amenti. If you're interested to see an archaeologist and art historian's reaction to Amenti, the horror game, well, you can check that out now as well. And as always, as I always say, keep your books open, stay curious, and I will see you guys next time on the Dirt Diaries.